Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this night-ending bonus upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter. So, I was speaking to a subscriber earlier, and they have a job where they feel they could be recognized easily. He wanted to share an encounter with me that he had heard through a friend's father. I invited him to come on, but instead he decided to share it with me. But also, he had a brief, mild encounter. He and his friend were walking through some deep wilderness down by a creek. Some really thick mountain laurel. No other fauna were growing. It was not a place where deer or other animals would be. They were having a hard time traversing through this area. And as they were walking, they both stumbled across this huge clump of dark brown, blackish, with silvery sheen to it, a clump of hair, which they both couldn't recognize. He's very familiar with bear and other animals that call the state of Georgia home. But yeah, he shared that with me before this next encounter that his friend's father's friend had, which is pretty interesting and terrifying. So needless to say, this story starts off probably, I'd say 20, 30 years ago. This guy's friend, dad, had a friend, and they were really close, hunting buddies, families knew each other. So apparently this guy goes out, tells his wife, hey, I'm going out to my hunting spot. I'll be home at this time. And he goes out and goes hunting. The wife doesn't hear anything from him all night. The next morning, she goes over to her husband's friend's house, who went out to find him. Now, he doesn't know exactly where he's gonna be, but he makes a couple of educated guesses and goes to where this guy's tree stand is. Now, as he's coming up to the tree stand, he can see visibly that his friend is in the stand, refusing to come down, just horribly terrified. The friend eventually gets him to come down, and they end up going to this guy's vehicle and leaving. On the way home, the friend shares what had happened that previous day. So apparently what happened was he gets out, goes out to his stand and climbs up and is perched waiting for a deer to come along. As he's sitting there, he hears some movement and activity coming from the left-hand side. And he's waiting. He can tell that it's a large animal. And pretty soon he sees this huge creature come up. Now, at first, he thinks it's a Sasquatch until he realizes that this thing has a muzzle and ears. I'm not sure about the tail, but muzzle and ears. And it's walking towards him in his tree stand. He's terrified. This creature stops almost directly underneath where he's standing and looks up at him. They're both staring at each other for probably 30 seconds, and this creature turns and walks back the same direction it had just come from. He's sitting in this tree stand, terrified at this point. He can hear the creature, or what he thinks is the creature, moving around all throughout the woods around him. He's so afraid he doesn't even want to get down. He ends up spending the night in that tree stand, and there is no more sighting of the creature, but there are noises throughout the woods all night as well until his buddy comes out. He described it, because I'm assuming this was well before Dogman was even talked about, but he described it like a bear man. And that was this experience, and he shared this with a few people. Now, this brings me to an interesting kind of subject, topic, whatever. But Tim Coonbo Baker, who I've had on my channel, who I admire. I don't like calling anyone an expert in this field, but if I were to have to call anyone an expert, it would be him. Yeah, Victor is an expert in killing these creatures, but scientifically and studying them, Coonbo would be who I would consider an expert. Very humble man. He doesn't consider himself an expert. He's always learning. But he came to the realization that in the 70s and 80s, as he's taking these cases and talking to these people who have seen these Sasquatch, one day it dawns on him, and he realizes that he has misidentified some of the stories that he has heard from people that he's interviewed. And then Coonbo comes up with his chart or catalog, what have you, of the cryptids that he has studied. And he believes there are 4. Now, with him, I will trust his... I really admire Coonbo. Brilliant guy. I've talked to him numerous times about cryptids and other things beside cryptids. So I know where he's been, what he's seen, what have you. And I take his classification a lot more serious than the classification of this one that's out there from a person who has never had an encounter and never seen one, but yet feels that he is knowledgeable enough in this to make a classification chart with type 1 variant B, which is kind of stupid. But Coonbos is 4, and it's very simple. There's the East Coast Sasquatch, which is smaller in stature, pretty aggressive, but not really. And it's on the East Coast, probably goes out a little ways throughout the country, but that's one of his. Then there's the Pacific Northwest. Now, the Pacific Northwest is larger, much larger, and more aggressive. And through encounters that we have all heard and listened to or read about, you know, these squatches going all the way from Northern California up to Alaska through Canada are just ginormous mountain giants. And then we have what I refer to as the werewolf, which is a Sasquatch-like creature with no tail, a muzzle that resembles almost a dog, but not really. You know, there's no tail. It's got the ears on top of its head. Very aggressive and very intelligent. And then the Dogman, which is the hocked legs, the tail, the aggressive, pointed ears, long muzzle. And that's what Coonbos chart is. And it's very simple. And it makes a lot of sense to me. And now, yes, the people are going to say, well, what about the hyena one? What about this one? What about that one? Well, you just got to realize that, okay, well, I'm looking at this creature that resembles a hyena, but has the characteristics of a dogman. So we'll put that into that category. Now, it's a little easier because then it's not a type B variant A14, whatever. It's Dogman. Now, we're humans. There are black humans. There are Chinese humans, yellow humans. The Native Americans are red humans. I'm not being racist in any way. I'm just classifying. But we are all humans. We all have different looks and different features. Does that make us any less human? No. No, it doesn't. We're from different places in the country or world, but we all have the human DNA. Why not classify us, like, oh, well, he's from Guam, or she's from Indonesia, so she is a human variant 14B. Well, that's stupid. So I like Coonbos chart. Now, being that said, this guy in the hunting, my brain just went dead. Being in his tree stand, sees something that he immediately thinks is a Sasquatch. Misidentification, because, oh, wait, it has a muzzle and pointed ears. So it's not a Squatch, but it's something else. Which brings me to the next part of the upload, because there's been many misidentifications and many non-identification of the next part of the upload, which would be missing humans throughout time. Now, one of the most notable is the boy named Dennis Martin. And people really kind of resonate to that case because he's a 7-year-old boy. He was with his family. There's a lot of mystery to it. But yet, a mile away from the disappearance of the boy, someone sees a huge brown-haired creature carrying something. We automatically jump to Sasquatch. Well, why couldn't it have been a type 3 or werewolf? Or why couldn't it have been Dogman? You know? But there's a lot more cases that have a lot more strangeness and a lot more mystery to them. And I want to share a couple with you right now. Dennis Martin's case is very, very mysterious and very tragic and sad for the family. And it's terrible when children go missing. So let's get into this next part. Each year, there are thousands of search and rescue incidences logged across National Park system. They typically involve missing hikers, visitors who have gotten injured, boating accidents, and climbing incidents. Far and away, the bulk of these incidents are quickly resolved, usually in less than a dozen or so hours. During 2007, for instance, a National Park Service reported 3,593 search and rescue incidents. Of those, 2,566 individuals were uninjured. Another 136 died. Rarely do search and rescues go unresolved, but in 2007, there were 19 cases where the individual who spurred the search was never found. Such unresolved cases grow cold over the years, but never forgotten. One from 1969 in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park seems fresh and painful in the minds of some of the rangers who participated in the search. The search in Utah that took place a few years ago for the Bardsley boy just brought back memories of Dennis Martin. Big-time memories of Dennis Martin's search recalls Larry Nielsen, who was the Cadiz Cove District Ranger in 1969. It was so similar in so many ways. In Utah that took place a few years back for Bardsley boy just brought memories of Dennis Martin for me. Big-time memories of Dennis Martin's search recalls Larry Nielsen, who was the Cadiz Cove District Ranger in 1969. It was so similar in so many ways. Garrett Bardsley was a 12-year-old Boy Scout who vanished without a trace during a camping trip in the Uinta Mountains in 2004. While fishing by a lake with his dad, he got his feet wet, headed back to camp a short distance away, and never came back. 35 years separated the disappearance of Garrett Bardsley and Dennis Martin. The cases were similar, and the frustration and puzzlement they exacted from those who went searching. Word that Dennis, a soon-to-be 7-year-old, went missing 40 years ago on Father's Day spurred one of the largest hunts in National Park Service history. Before it ended, the FBI investigated. More than 1,400 searchers combed the Great Smokies' rugged backcountry, and an estimated 70,000 linear miles were said to have been walked. 1,100 helicopter sorts were flown. Noted psychic Gene Dixon suggested that the boy may be found. The White House monitored the search, and active Army and National Guard troops were on summer maneuvers, joined the hunt. For 2 weeks they searched. The Martin family from Tennessee was celebrating the Father's Day weekend as it traditionally had by heading into the Smokies June 13th, the Friday before Father's Day. Father William, his young sons Dennis and Douglas, and their grandfather Clyde were striding up onto the backbone of the Smokies. Setting out from Cadiz Cove Campground, They moved up Anthony Creek Trail for a little more than a mile, then veered right onto Russell Field Trail and continued on for several more miles in warm summer weather. The martins moved along Ledbetter Ridge above the left prong of Anthony Creek and made their final run of the day to Russell Field. A grassy break in the forest, this clearing offered room for the youngsters to burn off whatever energy they still carried. For the adults, the bald offered panoramic views across the Smokies and time to relax, visit, and watch their offspring grow in the mountains. There the martins spent the night, rising on June 14th for the final 90-minute or so push east to Spencefield and its simple three-sided shelter where more relatives were waiting. While the martins long had traced this route to Spencefield for Dennis, whose 7th birthday was a week away, the 1969 hike and campout with his grandfather, father, and 9-year-old brother was his first overnighter, a passage that would sharply define the separation between him and his younger siblings and mark his acceptance into the mountains. Arriving at Spencefield, the martins found the clearing that trends northeast to southwest, one that basks under sunny skies, but which also offers a little shelter from the pounding thunderstorms, which are common in the Smokies come summer. From there, the Anthony Creek drainage funnels any rain that falls on the north side of the Bald quickly down into Tennessee, while the Eagle Creek drainage does the same on the south side, flowing in the crooked and rocky leaps and bounds onto North Carolina, where it dumps its fill into the Fontana Reservoir. The Smokies are rippled with drainage, eroded by creeks that bound over ledges and dart through boulder-choked stretches before coming to a rest momentarily in pools. The mountains, Flask in many places, feature cliffs both steep and cut with crevices. Between these mountains and their shadows are the occasional wildcats that pass through the area and the resident black bear that can easily and actually do reach 500 pounds by feasting on fish vegetation that's so abundant in the Smokies. Into this realm of bears, panthers, feral hog, rattlesnakes wandered Dennis. The slight 4-foot-tall youngster and his older brother had been playing with 2 other boys on the forest clearing, while the adults relaxed on the west side of the Bald within view of the youngsters. The whispering boys conspired around some clumps of serviceberry bushes to split up, circle the knob around the cloaking woods, and surprise the adults from behind. Douglas and the other 2 boys went south and then west. Dennis went northwest along the Appalachian Trail and disappeared into the forest. We knew what they were doing, 32-year-old William Martin would later say. We also knew that when they sent Dennis another way because they thought the red T-shirt he was wearing would spoil their scheme. 3 minutes later, perhaps no more than 5 passed without anyone spotting or hearing Dennis. At that point, his father began calling out for him. He then followed the Appalachian Trail west for about a mile before doubling back, thinking Dennis surely had rejoined the others at Spencefield. When William Martin found this hope shattered, he headed west again, this time all the way back to Russell Field, only to return alone to Spencefield. While the boy's father was making these frantic searches, their grandfather Clyde headed all the way back down Anthony Creek to Cadiz Cove, a distance of roughly 8.5 miles, and reached the ranger station shortly before 8:30 p.m. to summon help. Initially, the response, summoned by word of Dennis having gone missing, was not unlike any other hasty search that was been mounted in this country's national park and national forest. A small group quickly looks in the immediate area where the missing person was last seen. And with their efforts prove fruitless, the search broadens, both in terms of terrain and searchers. These days, searchers have been refined to a point that in 90 to 95% of the cases, the subject is located within 12 hours. But 40 years ago, searches weren't so methodical. The hunt for Dennis Martin turned into the largest to date search and rescue mission in the Park Service history. Spencefield would turn into a literal military base with landing zones cut from the surrounding forest. Park Service staff quickly became overwhelmed by the turnout of volunteers and struggled to manage them. Complicating the search was Dennis was rain. More than 2.5 inches of rain and possibly 3 inches in and around Spence Field fell throughout the night. The aftermath not only challenged searchers the following morning, but it would confound them by the ensuing days. That Dennis Martin became lost was not that unusual. Thousands of national park visitors find themselves lost or injured and need rescuing by rangers every year. More often than not, those searchers have conducted in the mountainous setting above 5,000 feet. Some settings, such as the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, feature dense, confusing, and cloaking thickets of vegetation that can trap you if you stray from the established trail. Other landscapes can lead you astray with maze-like canyons or trails that lead through fins of rock and scurry across featureless, slick rock. Some who go lost become confused and disoriented by hypothermia, heat exhaustion, altitude sickness, and some are trapped by water. Where had Dennis Martin wandered off, and how come other hikers in the area did not see him? In hindsight, Martin case came to be an example of how not to conduct a search and rescue mission. Too many people were on the ground without proper supervision. A strong overhead team was not in place to direct operations. Search training, perhaps, had not been practiced as much as it is today, and certainly was not perfected. For 2 weeks, the active search dragged on. At one point, 71 Green Beret were engaged, living in the mountains, eating rattlesnake they came upon in their fruitless search for Dennis. The park spokesman at one point, no doubt, in the moment, he had later wished he could erase, practically promising that the boy would be found. He may be a little bit the worse for wear after being out in the open so long, but I am confident we will find him. Officials finally had to admit it was fruitless to continue the hunt after crews intensively covered nearly 60 square miles of the park's backcountry. The boy's family, refusing to believe he died in the mountains, offered $5,000 reward for information leading to his whereabouts. It went unclaimed. Ask Larry Nielsen today where he thinks Dennis Martin is, and he will answer this quick and short. I think he's up there, he replies, referring to the thicket-tangled spine of the Appalachians. At around 8 a.m., Friday, August 20th, 2004, 12-year-old Garrett Bardsley and his father, Kevin, got up early. While on a Boy Scout camping trip, they headed down to the nearby lake in the Uinta Mountains in Utah for some fishing. The father and son lived in Elk Ridge and were camping with 18 scouts and 6 or 7 adults for Thursday, August 19th, and had planned to leave Saturday. Garrett managed to get his shoes, pants, and socks soaked with water while fishing, and he told his dad he wanted to walk back and change at camp because he felt uncomfortable in the wet clothes. He told his dad he wouldn't be long and would soon be back to the lake to try to land a fish for breakfast. The rest of the Boy Scout group were camping just up the hill, a mere 150 to 250 feet away. They had walked that trail several times before, so Kevin let his son head back to camp alone while he continued fishing. He really thought it was no big deal. Just in case, Kevin kept his eyes on Garrett as he walked around the lake, and even shouted directions, reminding Garrett which path would lead him straight back to camp. Then after 20 minutes or so, Kevin wondered what had taken his son so long to get back. He decided to return to camp and see what happened. And Garrett was nowhere to be found. None of the other Boy Scouts had seen him. A huge search of the area with hundreds of official and unofficial searchers turned up nothing apart from one of Garrett's Nike socks. The ice fishing pole he was carrying when he left his father was never located. What happened to Garrett? Abduction, animal attack, or something more? Huber Lake is a lake in the Uinta Mountains in Summit County, Utah, within the Camas Range District, about 3,500 feet northwest of Mount Marcel. The lake is at an elevation of 10,426 feet. It was less than a quarter of a mile from the lake on a well-established path that connected with a road another quarter mile away. A family friend said the distance to the camp from where they had been fishing was no more than 150 paces distance. More than 200 volunteers and search and rescue team members searched into the night on Sunday, August 21st, for Garrett, who was wearing a black hooded sweatshirt, reversible black and red sweatpants, and white Converse tennis shoes. Additional search and rescue teams from Cache County joined the teams from Utah, Salt Lake, and Duchesne counties. He had no provisions or a backpack, but was carrying a short black and chrome ice fishing pole when he vanished. Hundreds of volunteers and personnel from Summit County Sheriff's Office searched on foot, horseback, with dogs, and this effort was scaled back to more than 50 professional search and rescue personnel working on foot after this. The only evidence that searchers found was Garrett's Nike sock a half a mile from the spot where he disappeared in a granite boulder field. Summit County Sheriff David Edmonds said, "The sock appears to have been taken off of a wet foot wadded, very consistent with what we knew about Garrett." Because of where the sock was found, Edmonds said it would be in a line of the assumption that he sought shelter from the cold weather, maybe by going into a boulder field for a crevasse or outcropping, something to try to get out of the weather. The mountainous terrain meant that the temperature dropped around 18 degrees at night. Garrett disappeared. The official search for Garrett was called later, 9 days. A 3-mile radius and rugged mountains from where he was last seen was thoroughly searched. After the official search was over, the family and many dedicated friends and volunteers continued searching, returning at least 2 or 3 times a week until October. Further searches happened after the winter of 2004, but turned up nothing. Kevin Bardsley said, "We know that it is often discouraging at the end of the day when we haven't found him or any signs of him, but we want you to know that every area that we search just gets us that much closer to finding him. I've speculated and speculated. I don't know where he is. I just wish I knew. If I did, I'd just end this." No other sign of Garrett was ever found in the area. Was he abducted, killed by a grizzly or mountain lion? No sign of attack was found. It's strange that even his fishing rod was never found. Perhaps his remains lie in some hidden crevasse. Jared Michael Negrete disappeared July 19, 1991, Mount San Gorgonio, San Bernardino National Forest, California. 12-year-old Jared Michael Negrete was a Boy Scout who was on his first overnight backpacking trip. He was last seen on Friday, July 19, 1991, at about 6 p.m. when he fell behind his fellow scouts on a hike to the summit of 11,500-foot Mount San Gorgonio in San Bernardino National Forest, Southern California. An extensive search turned up only some candy wrappers and a camera with a haunting image of Jared on it. 30 years later, despite the large search and follow-up hikes into the area by amateur investigators, no remains have been found. Many are asking why a scout leader would leave Jared alone on his first trip while he and the other scouts completed their hike. San Gorgonio Mountain, also known as Old Grayback, is the highest peak in Southern California, and the traverse ranges at 11,503 feet. It's in the San Bernardino Mountains, 27 miles east of the city of San Bernardino. It lies within the San Gorgonio Wilderness, part of the Sand and Snow National Monument managed by the San Bernardino National Forest. Jared, 12-year-old, was an 8th grader with Hispanic background who lived in El Monte in LA County, California. He had black hair, brown eyes, 5'2", 150 pounds. He was wearing a tan-colored t-shirt, which may have been a Boy Scout-styled, green Boy Scout pants, and a pair of black high-top pro-wing sneakers. He had a small birthmark on his right cheek, wore glasses with brown plastic rims. He was carrying a 2-quart canteen of water. July 19th, 1991, Jared was on a trip with his scout troop to an area close to the summit. In total, the group included the leader and 6 scouts. At around 6 p.m., Jared fell behind his fellow scouts on the hike to the summit. Another group of hikers spotted Jared staggering behind and notified the scout troop leader at the summit. They had seen him. He was shortcutting the switchbacks on his way up the trail and was told not to and stay on the trail. A switchback is a trail up a steep mountain or hill that is like a zigzag pattern instead of a straight trail. Shortcutting a switchback is bad trail etiquette because it kills vegetation, loosens soil, creating a new trail straight up and down the hill, which will, in time, get large and hollowed out from erosion. However, the scout leader, an experienced hiker, said he would pick up Jared on the way down. When the leader finally was able to descend the mountain to pick Jared up, he was nowhere to be found. As soon as the troop leader realized that Jared had disappeared, he accompanied his 5 other scouts back to base camp and then hiked about 5 miles in the dark to get help. San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies, along with search and rescue teams from as far away as Sierra Madre and San Dimas, began searching a 130 square mile area. Within 3 days, their search was focused on a 6 square mile area where a footprint believed to match one of Jared's high-top tennis shoes was spotted. Searchers also discovered beef jerky and candy wrappers believed to have been dropped by the scout, and most importantly, his camera was located. On the film roll were 12 pictures. Most of the pictures were landscape scenes apparently taken before Jared went missing. But the final picture on the roll of film was a photograph of the scout's eyes and nose, taken with the aid of the camera's flash, possibly at night after he disappeared. Family members said it appeared Jared pointed his camera at his face and snapped the picture. It seemed possible that the boy had lost the camera while sliding down a portion of the mountainside. 70 officers, some who were airlifted by helicopter into the forest, and horseback riders, as well as helicopters with infrared, were deployed. Over the next 2 weeks, as many as 3,000 people had logged 45,000 hours scouring 50 square miles of San Bernardino National Forest, from Uglas Oaks to Whitewater Canyon. A blue water bottle was found, but this was confirmed not to be Jared's and had probably washed down the mountain by flash flooding. The temperatures were warm enough for Jared to survive unaided on the mountain for a few days, and there was sufficient amount of water located in the area, as well as the bottle he was carrying. It seemed he did have limited amount of snacks with him. No further clues were found. Jared had vanished. Despite the discovery of the camera and its pictures, Jared remains missing 3 decades as of 2021. What happened on the day of July 19th, 1991? It is somewhat alarming that Jared, who was 12, was left behind by a scout leader. Generally, the slowest hikers are put in the middle of the group to avoid anyone being left behind. Leaving a scout on his first trip away to wait from others to finish their hike would nowadays be considered risky or even negligent. I just want to cut in really quick. I was in Boy Scouts, and 91, I was 15. So prior to that, like 88 when I stopped Boy Scouting and went to the Explorers, I was a Life Scout. I stopped Boy Scouting when I was 15.
it was common for hikers and Boy Scout when we were going on hikes, stragglers. It was common. Things are different nowadays. The world is full of snowflakes, full of just, I don't know. But, it was back in the day when kids drank out of the garden hose and pissed behind a tree. Boys were boys, and they just messed around while scouting. Chances are, we don't know really the time difference of Jared being away from the troop. But obviously, how worried were these hikers that stumbled upon him? Why not take him up the summit if you were that worried? And how far could he have fallen behind? For God's sakes, we used to have a heavier set kid. And we would go on these hikes in the Adirondacks. We would hike these old fire trails and come up to, these old fire towers and stuff like that. Just, deep in the Adirondacks. So deep that there was nothing around for a good 50, 60 miles. 100 if you want to really get into that. But it was not that uncommon. And this kid who was, a little slower than us, he would always catch up. Why? Because he kept going. It's obvious that he was going. Jared was seen zigzagging, trying to make it up there. So during this, something took him out, took him off that friggin' mountain and brought him somewhere. Anyway, back to this. I'm sorry. Did he fall off the trail or slip down the mountainsides? He was seen shortcutting the switchbacks on his way up the trail. But after an extensive search, why wasn't anything found? Probably got tired, waited for the other scouts to return, so he decided maybe to walk down the mountain alone. It seems possible that he slipped, was severely injured, or died from his injuries if he went off the main trail, but he would have been found. Was he abducted or murdered? There's no evidence of foul play involved, but the trail on the mountain is well used, so it's possible a predator saw Jared alone and took advantage of him. However, if it was a human predator, it would have attracted attention from the other hikers in the area. Did he succumb to a black bear or other, in quotations, wildlife? It's possible, but there was no signs of blood, drag marks, or other evidence. So my guess is on all three of these cases, like Dennis Martin, something scooped these boys up. Something very strong, very quick, very dangerous, and not a human being. Something very large and hairy. And I'm not going to say Dogman. I'm not going to say Sasquatch. It could have been either one. It could have been a werewolf. It could have been whatever. The point is, these three cases are so friggin' similar and not solved.
And there you have it, folks, tonight's night ending bonus. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. After all, it is your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and what gives folks like all of us a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events are real. This is out there and it does happen. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the answers, and God bless.